The air was thick with dust and fear. The Indus River shimmered under a dying sun, turning the waters red and gold. On its banks, the men of Alexander the Great stood silent, not from discipline, but dread. These were not the same soldiers who had once marched with laughter through Persia, nor the proud men who had crushed Darius III beneath the thunder of Macedonian steel. These were ghosts in armor. Something had begun stalking them. It started with whispers. A missing scout here, a torn tent there. Horses found half devoured by something that left no tracks. At first, the men blamed Indian tribes, the same ones who had resisted them in the jungles. But soon, the stories grew stranger. Soldiers spoke of a shadow that moved beneath the river, too large to be a crocodile. They said it glowed at night, not with fire, but with a pale, ghostly light that shimmered through the reeds. Some swore they saw a massive coil rise from the water, scales glistening like metal, before it sank silently back into the depths. One morning, the army awoke to find a full patrol missing, 12 men gone without a trace. Only their spears remained, standing upright in the mud, as though planted there by unseen hands. Even Alexander's hardened veterans began to tremble. Alexander, ever fearless, dismissed the tales at first. He had faced worse: the siege of Tyre, the battle at Gaugamela, the rebellion of his own men. But when his most trusted captain, Ptolemy, came to him pale and shaken, the king knew it was no ordinary rumor. "Majesty," Ptolemy said, "we saw it. It was no beast I've ever known." The river, it moved. Alexander's eyes narrowed. The river, it rose, sire, as if alive. That night, Alexander ordered fires lit across the camp and guards stationed along the riverbank. No one slept. The jungle was alive with sound, insects screaming, branches cracking in the darkness. And then, sometime past midnight, the river fell silent. Not even the frogs croaked. The first scream came from the east line. By the time Alexander reached the shore with his torch, the guards were gone. Only ripples danced on the surface of the black water. Then, slowly, something began to rise, something vast. A massive serpent's head, glistening with water, lifted above the surface. Its scales shimmered like bronze shields. Its eyes, two burning embers, fixed on the soldiers frozen in horror. One man loosed a javelin. The spear struck, but the creature barely flinched. It opened its jaws, revealing fangs the size of daggers, and let out a sound that was neither hiss nor roar. Something far worse. The men broke ranks. Panic spread. Horses screamed. Torches fell into the river. And in the chaos, Alexander stood still, staring into those monstrous eyes as if trying to read the will of the gods themselves. When dawn came, the beast was gone. All that remained were torn shields, shattered weapons, and a trail of crushed reeds leading back into the depths. Alexander ordered the river mapped, every bank searched, every rumor questioned. The scholars in his court tried to explain it, calling it a giant python, a draken, or even a guardian spirit of the Indus, angered by the invader's presence. But the men were beyond reason. They began calling it Draken Indicos, the serpent of the industry. From that day onward, the river became cursed in their minds. Soldiers refused to drink from it. Horses refused to cross. And every night, when the winds rose, they swore they could hear it, the deep, distant breathing of something waiting beneath the waters. Alexander, restless and proud, refused to retreat. He ordered his engineers to build a floating bridge across the Indus, directly over the place where the beast had last appeared. The men obeyed, but none dared look into the water. And as the bridge neared completion, a strange silence fell again across the camp. Something was coming. The bridge swayed gently over the black waters of the industry. Beneath it, the current was slow, too slow. The men of Alexander's army worked in silence, eyes fixed on the planks, refusing to glance into the depths. Even the carpenters, hardened from years of war, muttered prayers to Zeus and Poseidon under their breath. The night before the crossing, Alexander summoned his officers. Around a small fire, their faces glowed red and gold. Tired, sunburnt, but still loyal. "This creature," Alexander began, "it feeds on fear. And fear is what weakens men before any battle. I will not have my army broken by a river." Hephaestion leaned forward. "You mean to fight it? If it exists," Alexander said, his eyes glinting, "I will see it. If it bleeds, it can die." The room fell quiet. Even Ptolemy, who had seen the thing with his own eyes, said nothing. The king's will was law and his courage, both his greatest strength and his greatest curse. At dawn, the crossing began. Trumpets sounded, and the first ranks stepped onto the wooden bridge. The soldiers held their shields high, every creak of the planks echoing like a heartbeat. Below, the river was still, a mirror of molten gold beneath the rising sun. Then, halfway across, the water rippled. It started small, like a breeze brushing the surface. Then came a swirl, slow, deliberate, growing wider with each passing second. Men froze. Horses neighed and reared. And from that circle of water, something rose. It was no serpent this time. It was a mountain of flesh, rippling with scales so dark they shimmered blue. Its head alone was the size of a war chariot. When it moved, the bridge trembled. Its eyes, those burning red eyes, met Alexander's from across the distance. For a moment, no one breathed. Then the creature lunged. The beast struck the bridge with a sound like thunder. What splintered, soldiers screamed. 24 men vanished into the river in an instant, dragged beneath the waves. Alexander's horse reared and nearly threw him off, but he steadied it, spear in hand, eyes blazing with defiance. "Hold the line," he roared. "The gods are with us." The archers loosed volleys of arrows that bounced off the creature's scales like rain. It coiled, its body wrapping around the bridge's supports, crushing them like reeds. The river surged with its movement, swallowing men, horses, and weapons alike. Alexander spurred his horse forward, straight toward the beast. The soldiers watched in disbelief as their king rode across a collapsing bridge, a spear aimed at the creature's eye. When the spear struck, the beast let out a deafening hiss, a sound so deep it shook the air itself. The river exploded with foam. And then silence. The creature slipped beneath the surface, leaving only shattered timbers and the echo of its roar. For hours, no one spoke. The survivors gathered on the bank, staring at the ruins of the bridge and the calm, glassy water that hid whatever lay beneath. Alexander stood apart from them, soaked in river mud, his armor dented, his spear broken. Ptolemy approached carefully. "You struck it, sire. I saw blood on your spear." Alexander turned slowly, his voice low. "Then it lives." He gazed at the river with something like awe, or perhaps fear. "Tell the men, we march by land. Let the beast have its river." As the army marched eastward along the banks, strange things continued to happen. Livestock vanished in the night. Soldiers claimed to hear low rumbles from beneath the ground, as though the creature was following them beneath the river's current. Local guides whispered that the Macedonians had angered the Naga, the sacred serpent spirits that guarded the waters of India. "No mortal can kill what was born from the gods," one elder warned. "If you see its fire again, run." But Alexander did not run. He pressed onward toward the edge of the world, determined to carve his empire where no Greek had ever stood. Yet the deeper they marched into India, the more the men began to change. They no longer feared armies. They feared the river. They feared the night. They feared the shadow of what they had awakened. And soon, they would learn that the serpent was only the beginning. Weeks passed. The jungles of India closed around Alexander's army like a green coffin, humid, endless, and alive with sounds that did not belong to the world they knew. Each step forward felt heavier, slower, as though the earth itself resisted their advance. The men spoke less. Some refused to drink the river water, whispering that it was cursed. But Alexander pressed on. He had conquered Persia, crossed the Hindu Kush, and defeated every army that stood before him. He would not be broken by shadows and superstition. Yet every night, as he lay in his tent, he could hear it, the low, rolling rumble of water moving where no wind blew. Something still followed them. It was near the edge of the Hyphasis River when it returned. A thick fog had rolled in, swallowing the world. The guards could barely see their own hands. Horses neighed and pulled at their reins, sensing something in the mist. Then came the smell, heavy, metallic like blood and salt. The first to vanish were the scouts. By dawn, only their helmets remained, half buried in the mud. When Alexander heard, he ordered a perimeter set. Fires were lit in a wide circle, torches high, weapons drawn. The jungle pulsed with the sound of unseen creatures, but none dared come close, except one. The river began to move. At first it was subtle, a single ripple breaking the fog. Then the water surged, rising as though something vast were rising beneath it. The men held their breath as the surface split apart, and the serpent of the Indus emerged once more. It was larger now, darker. Its scales shimmered like wet iron, and along its spine, faint streaks of blue fire glowed, pulsing like veins of lightning. The creature let out a sound that was not merely heard but felt, a deep, ancient vibration that rattled the bones. The soldiers fled. Only a handful stood their ground beside Alexander, his companions, the men who had crossed the world for him. They formed a circle, shields up, spears ready. Alexander stared at the beast, unblinking. "It follows us," he said quietly. "Why?" Ptolemy's voice trembled. "Because you wounded it, my king. It hunts the one who defied it." The serpent lunged, its jaws snapping so close that Alexander's cloak tore from the wind of it. He rolled aside, grabbing a torch and hurling it into the beast's face. Fire met scales, and for a moment, the night exploded in flame. The creature recoiled, thrashing violently, its coils smashing trees like twigs. The ground shook. The river boiled. And then, as quickly as it came, the monster slipped beneath the surface again, disappearing into the depths, leaving nothing but silence and a trail of steam. When the fog cleared, the army saw what remained: crushed trees, dead horses, broken men. Alexander stood alone by the riverbank, staring at the still water. His men waited for orders, but none came. He simply whispered, "It cannot be slain. Some things belong to the gods." That night, Alexander's camp was silent. The soldiers avoided the river, keeping to their fires. But a few swore they saw something enormous moving far downstream, glowing faintly under the moonlight. Others claimed they dreamed of a vast serpent coiling around the earth, whispering in an ancient tongue. In the morning, Alexander gave the order to turn back. His officers were stunned. He had never retreated from anything. Not from empires, not from men. But as the army began its long march home, none spoke against him. They knew what he knew. The serpent was not a creature to be conquered. It was a warning. Years later, when Alexander lay dying in Babylon, some say he awoke from fever and spoke to the darkness. "I have seen the edge of the world and what waits beneath its waters." His generals thought it was delirium. But in the silence that followed his death, the soldiers who had crossed the Indus remembered. They remembered the fog, the screams, the eyes that burned through the night. And they swore that in the rivers of India, something still moves beneath the surface, something ancient, patient, and waiting. Because the world Alexander conquered was vast, but not all of it was meant for man.